Hello everyone. You just got done going through with your instructor a couple of slides talking about why to think about these things ethically before we get into difficult situations, whether training or combat. But also, we mentioned that the just war tradition is one important framework, one important way from our heritage, if you will, and that allows us and enables us to think about these questions and other questions, similar questions, in very helpful ways, and ways that can give us an opportunity to think through and develop our own answers. But before we get into that, I want to talk just a little bit about three things that the just war tradition is not, in order to dispel any possible mischaracterizations or misunderstandings up front. First and foremost, the just war tradition is not cheerleading. Now you might think to yourself, well, what's cheerleading? Can you give me an example of cheerleading, Chaplain? Well, I think an easy example that most of us would be able to recall comes from our history books in July of 1861. That was the first Battle of Bull Run on the 21st of July. And at that first battle, some people who were not in uniform decided to bring their lunches and basically have a picnic and watch the battle. Now, I don't know about you, but that's typically not what I think of when I think of a picnic lunch. I tend to want to go to the park, but some people wanted to just go watch the North and the South duke it out. They ended up leaving in a hurry. Now, historians more recently have said it might not have been quite the disastrous retreat that some people wrote about the day after, but we do know that they definitely left in a hurry, had to scramble and get out of there because the North, who they thought would win, ended up losing the first Battle of Bull Run, and people had to get out of there because they thought, oh no, the South are going to push all the way through to Washington, D.C., and far from winning this immediately, we just might lose this immediately. They were there to cheerlead, basically. Cheerleading is emotionalism, but there's no ethical content to it. Think about when you go to an American football game, right? From an ethical perspective, it doesn't matter if I'm cheering for the Kansas City Chiefs or the Minnesota Vikings or the Chicago Bears or the Green Bay Packers. Now, I live in the upper Midwest, so maybe it matters on different levels, but it doesn't matter ethically. It really doesn't. And it's not like there's any ethical content to why I'm cheering for one person to do well. There's no ethic behind it. It's all emotion. I'm just driving it emotionally. So the just war tradition is not that. You're not going to learn, all right, how do we go rah, 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 and just cheer each other on in the middle of battle. That's not what this is about. The second thing it is not is warmongering, that is encouraging war, ignoring peaceful options, having tunnel vision, just saying we are going to fight and we're going to fight hard. And that's it. And it's purposely just ignoring any other peaceful options, any off-ramps. It just wants to go straight ahead and to fight. Often this happens in more planning stages or earlier stages, but it doesn't have to. It can also occur at the operational and even tactical level as well. A couple of examples from history just to help understand what is warmongering. One would be Julius Streicher from World War II, his anti-Semitic newspaper that he published in Nazi Germany. Definitely the whole thing was warmongering. I don't know that I would say I'd encourage you to look at it, but I mean, if you want, there are some examples online, and you can see that that's exactly what he was doing. A more updated example would be Russian war bloggers as they are videotaping, unfortunately also publishing, the execution of Ukrainian POWs. And the way in which they did this was definitely, trying to further the Russian war machine, if you will. That's all they're focused on, warmongering. We will get them. Let's go, let's go, let's go, not considering other options. The just war tradition is not going to teach you that. It's not going to help you try to think about things that way. It's definitely more profound and more precise, I would argue, at least ethically, than that. The third thing it is not is holy war. The just war tradition is not holy war. This is a very important point because even in some academic literature that I have read, I would argue there are some academics who sometimes get these two things confused, and they are definitely not the same thing. Holy war is a war that is started and or perpetuated by religious differences. That's the main cause and reason for the war. It sees two sides as holy and unholy, or righteous and unrighteous. And we have, unfortunately, examples of this from within our own history. One might think of the 30 Years' War from 1618 to 1648. It occurred mostly in Central Europe, but eventually brought in, Sweden and others. That started because the Peace of Westphalia in 1555 said, hey, whatever your ruler is, that's the church that all the subjects belong to. By the end of the 30 Years' War, they said, you know what, maybe that should be separated out. The prince or the king can be whatever he is, and the people can be whatever they are. But for 30 years, Protestants and Catholics killed each other, literally just on the basis of religion. Another example, an even bloodier example, comes from the Taiping Rebellion from 1850 to 1864 in China. The millions died there. And that was definitely a holy war. A gentleman, a man, probably not such a gentleman if you read about him, but a man who believed ultimately that he was Jesus' brother and he was establishing the kingdom on earth. And so establishing the heavenly kingdom on earth, according to him, required war. And so he started and led a holy war up until his death. What the just war tradition is, it's not that. It's not going to help you try to think about how are you holy and righteous and how are everybody else, messed up and they're wrong. Rather, the just war tradition starts from the premise, the starting point, that everybody is a sinner. Everybody falls short. And so for the just war tradition, it is looking at things as sinners versus sinners. Imperfect people responding to injustices created by other imperfect people. So it's not cheerleading, it's not warmongering, and it is definitely not holy war.
Hello,